Belated happy 4th, guys.
Ooh, we had a good time. A lot of fireworks. It was loud and noisy, and one of 3 kids cried, and it wasn't the baby.
Yeah, the whole Twitter, which will be the topic of today's pod, was abuzz with 4th of July, so bad for dogs. Well, anyway, before we get too far, we're here.
We're in Montana where there's so many fireworks. It's unbelievable. The fireworks were going off all around the lake until midnight last night.
There's no laws about where you can do them or not.
There's no laws.
Really
we learned that when we were in Wyoming, and I asked for a helmet for a horse. Someone looked like me like I had 6 ears. But, greetings, everyone. Hello, listeners. Welcome to this week's More or Less with the Morins and the Lessons. We're here with Dave and Brit Morin going with the single camera for today's taping. We've got wake surfing champion of the world, Dave Morin, and matching
I don't know about that.
Outfits.
Just trying to catch up with you.
You know, leg burners. And Miss Queen of matching 4th of July outfits with an outfit for every occasion, Miss Brit Morin. So welcome, guys.
I do it for the gram, Jess. I do it for the gram and the threads.
What about the threads?
For the threads. I did post on the threads yesterday as one of 2,500.
I did too.
Early adopters.
God. Okay.
But we'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about that later. And then on the lesson side, we've got Sam Lesson, who, I get to talk about the social graph again. This is one of your go-tos.
You know, I've been talking about this for 15 years. At a certain point, it gets boring. But why not? We'll bring out the old hits.
The question is, are you going to be talking about it on Threads?
Absolutely. I love distribution.
Well, we've got a big menu today to signal. We're taping this where we've received a sneak peek of Facebook's, Meta's new Twitter killer coming to us from under the Instagram brand, and kind of coming when Twitter has committed a string of, forced, unforced errors. But the last several days for Twitter even have the journalists mad. I got to tell you, when the journalists turn on Twitter, there really is no help. So we're going to have
why are the journalists mad at Twitter?
Because they're the only people on Earth reading 10,000 tweets a day.
And using
other than the VCs, Sam. Other than the VCs.
The good news for journalism, though, is that because Twitter has capped the number of tweets people read per day, journalist productivity is way up.
You said it, not me. But I did try to IP block Twitter in the office once years ago as a sort of, I didn't try. I really wanted to try, but I didn't. This
is like parental controls for Twitter in the office.
Yeah, pretty much. That was my vision. But maybe it's just doing it all by itself for us. So obviously today we're going to dig into what...
Actually, for what it's worth, Jess, that is a great business model for Twitter. If Twitter basically offered to employers to block Twitter for money, that would be great. Right, that's actually a great way to make money. Elon,
take the enterprise plan. Yeah,
Elon. You can make a ton of money enterprise saying, "Look, it's for free, use it. If you want it blocked, you got to pay me."
It's like $1,000 a month for an icon is not a good business model. But
$50,000 a month to make sure that on all of my enterprise devices and things for security purposes, Twitter is blocked. There's a business model.
It reminds me of when ByteDance limited in China how many hours of time the youth could be on. I don't know if it was Douyin or which one of their apps, but yes, they added a feature saying stop using us. But you guys have to let me get through the menu of things that we're going to discuss, and then we will discuss. Okay, so we've got future of social media, Twitter versus Threads, is Twitter dead? Lots of views from the couples on the pod. A couple other interesting developments. I mean, it's been a holiday week, but some new reports around Chat GPT kind of slow in its role, as well as some developments in enterprise and cloud computing. And we're going to end with a hot button topic among our friends lately, which is the full body scanning MRI. Is it worth it or not? This is a whole new startup category. We're going to bring you inside it and help you understand and probably have a lively debate. So, okay, first to the social medias. Sam, what is Threads? How should we think about it?
I feel like I'm the only one who hasn't gotten access, so I don't know why you're asking me.
I can tell you about it.
I'm surprised by that, but I do want to hear Sam's opinion.
Okay, well, I'll do the explainer.
I think Sam should start.
This is where we break it down.
Sam doesn't even use it yet.
All right.
It's pretty obvious what it is, Brit. It's just
Sam,
Twitter.
Try to explain it without knowing.
It's Twitter from Instagram.
It's Twitter branded by Instagram as Threads.
It's not, though, having now used it for a day.
I know.
Okay, so tell us.
Okay.
Tell us, all you early adopters.
Well, here's the thing. As the influencer that got on before Dave was able to, and Dave had to grovel to get on.
That's what I did. I just needed to grovel. That was what I did.
You just need to, email your friends.
This is where in the couples, we have someone asserts their coolness factor of the other. Always goes well.
And this is what the person told me is, on Instagram, a lot of people are using text as their posts. They're taking screenshots of their tweets and they're putting it up as posts. And so we thought, why don't we just make a text-based Instagram? But the reality is...
That sounds like a kind of trivial way to explain what the actual strategy is.
Apparently that's
here.
what the employees are being told at Meta. This was in the data already happening, so we should change the product feature set. But reality is Elon took over Twitter. There's a huge gap to take over the text-based social network. And of course, Threads includes photos and things that you can attach to your thread. But yes, it looks and feels like Twitter.
I'm kind of annoyed that you can use photos on it out of the gate.
I'm not. That was actually my only concern because all I do on Twitter is post screenshot essays.
Oh, good point. Yes.
So I would actually the only thing that would keep me from using Threads is if I couldn't post screenshot essays to it.
It's a good point.
Here are the things I like so far about it. One, you just log in with your Instagram account, so you don't have to fill out a whole new thing. I got my username at Brit, which is great. Everything kind of ports over. I think in the future, there's going to be more interoperability between Threads and Instagram, so you can post.
Do you have to? Are the graphs different, or
they'll diverge.
The graphs will diverge.
But they
start the question.
Yeah, and so therefore,
they're already kind of divergent. But anyway, keep going, Britt. Okay. There's a lot to be talked about.
Of course they're divergent now. There's 2,500 users on it, Dave.
It does
be nice.
My big thing on Threads is people have been talking about a Twitter killer forever because, it's been a 10-year journey plus, right? And the reality is it's always failed for various reasons. Obviously, there's been a bunch, first in the conservative
Facebook
media.
failed. Remember when they switched feed to just real-time reverse cron to...
That was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. I was at the press conference. There was a whole press conference.
I was on the team that opened up the public follow graph on Twitter. That was one of the
it's funny. It's funny that you say that, Sam, because I was also on the team that opened it up in 2008 or 2009.
No, but Dave's point is there have been many teams that have done this. Okay, Sam, continue.
The point is that it's been, it's always not worked for various reasons, which I think we can kind of talk about a bunch of different minutiae around them. The big question for me is this, is the last several years, the basic story has been that graphs are dead, and we're all about algorithmic entertainment going forward. And it makes sense. If you're booting a new thing from scratch, you basically want to juice the crap out of whatever's working the most. And people don't really care who they follow. They just want to be entertained. It's a sit-back experience on TikTok and things like that, and that's worked. You haven't seen a graph-based app take off in a very long time, right? In fact, I'd actually argue the last time you saw graph-based apps take off, it was when Facebook's platform was far more open and things like Pinterest, et cetera, bootstrapped originally off of Facebook's data, right, and then went in their own direction from there. So
perhaps only Snap. I think Snapchat's the only app that got to scale.
TikTok.
But not really, because the way Snapchat got to scale was because Apple forced Facebook into a deal to open up address books, and then basically Snap back-ended Facebook's data through the address book, right? And so the reality is
I don't know. I think that's a stretch.
I don't, but the upshot is I think there's a pretty clear history of how this has all happened. It's very hard to kind of start a new graph from zero. And look, there is the address book now, which makes it easier. And there are different sources of graph data, but hard to come by, hard to build a network off of. I do think the interesting question on Threads will be, and I think this is a very big jump ball, is if Facebook said, hey, we're starting Threads with a clean slate graph. We'll promote the app. We'll throw some ads against it, whatever. There's no way it would work, right? Because the reality is there wouldn't be enough people there to show up for anyone to care about posting. And then anyone who showed up wouldn't see any posts, and it would just kind of suck, and it would collapse like all the other versions that have been tried at this. The question I think is really interesting is, can you like effectively transplant a graph, which is not the right graph. To be clear, the graph of Twitter, of Instagram is not actually the people that you want to follow in something like Threads. But it is kind of like transplanting a pig heart into a monkey, right? And if you get the first few beats going, there might be enough content in it, right? There's enough pull for people to go and post on it. There's enough reasons for people to go read it that you start forking and ending up with a separate graph that is text-based and does make sense and is native to the medium. So I actually am pretty optimistic. I think this will work. Now, whether it kills Twitter or just becomes yet another place you post things, I think is TBD. It's hard to see it killing Twitter, because for the same reasons it's hard to see it not working, which is this is all just about distribution. And like, if you give me another place to put content for distribution, I will use it, right? It's all self-similar. It's easy to transport. So like, why not? It's kind of like how, Reels works, but doesn't kill TikTok. People just cross-post it all. So like, I think it will work. I don't think it'll kill Twitter anytime soon, but I do think, it's another chink in the story of Twitter as the kind of things evolve.
I have a question. So your point that this might represent like a last gasp or utility, or just the next utility of the graph. But at the same time, these platforms, they're kind of like based on the graph, but then they're using like AI and algorithmic stuff just to feed you more of the stuff. Yeah, to juice it. And like there was a period where I think Mark even said that like 50% of the content was going to be that way or something, which then had to pull back from that a little bit because creators got very annoyed. But it does seem like the more algorithmically generated, we just going to give you the stuff we know you want, even if you don't follow the person, is the future.
I don't know. I think this will be interesting. I mean, the nice part about having a feed is you can just dial it up and down and find the right answer to some degree. Like, I don't think it's like a one and done thing. I will say this. I think one of the big difference, if they really want to build a conversation or text-based app, which is going to be far less entertaining than influencer photos. Like, you got to think about what market you're competing in. If you're competing with influencer photos of like skiing and surfing and whatever else, like, you will lose, right? That's not what text is for. And so I think the reality is maybe you boost something here or there. You definitely want to boost stuff to get really interesting people enough followers and engagement that they want to keep playing from a game perspective. But I do think that, like, in the sum total, like the thing that Twitter does have is it's such a stupid application. It's such a dumb platform that, like, you still kind of see the stuff that's relevant on like an understandable basis, more or less. And I think what you'll find with Threads is similar. Now, it does mean it'll monetize much worse, right? Like, text monetizes terribly.
Well, that's one of my big
the algorithmic stuff. So it's not like, I don't think it's hard for me to imagine it being financially like deeply meaningful, but I think it'll be a great application.
So Brit, I'm curious what kind of content you think you'll use Threads for and how that might be different from other platforms.
Well, I think it depends on the audience, right? I actually see like the niche communities forming in different social apps right now. Like, Twitter is where I go for like VCs, tech people, and journalists. Other than after you canceled all the journalists from using it, and then like right now I'm on Threads, and it's like I'm like DMing, or not, you can't DM yet. I'm at replying with Colleen Hoover, who's like this huge author of like fiction books.
But right now only has 40 followers.
Yeah. And it's kind of amazing because like, I'm like, hey, Colleen,
that's
what's
just like
up?
Early Clubhouse.
That doesn't scale.
We've all been
there. We've all been in those like,
I think it's interesting how they've curated
people
this.
are our best friends.
Well, I'm wondering who, like, to Sam's point, who the whales might become early on, and that might guide who the audience becomes, and then how I use it in particular, since I span across like tech, but also like sort of more lifestyle stuff.
I think you're going to copy paste stuff from Twitter back and forth, and it's going to be fine. And
I don't think I will. I don't think it's going to be a techie VC community. I think it's going to be like a more mainstream Instagram community.
I don't know. I think it's really hard to say. I mean, you're a very weird case, Brit, because I assume like you have a bunch of like followers that are more associated with your brand, Brit & Co. on Twitter. I'm sorry.
She actually has a much bigger audience on Instagram.
That's what Sam meant.
No, that's my point. Like, what is your audience on Instagram? It's like mommy influencers. Like, who is your audience?
We don't call them that anymore, Sam. Yeah, you just got canceled. Women,
awesome, ambitious
in their 20s,
women,
30s, and 40s. Not all.
They're not mommy bloggers anymore.
No. Oh my gosh. And I think if those are the people that move over to Threads because they aren't on Twitter. I think there's like a Venn diagram where like there's a bunch of people who don't use Twitter, like they don't want to use Twitter, but they might use Threads because they've never used Twitter, and they don't like this might be the first text-based system they've ever used. 100%. And if they have like-minded people, then like they might go over there.
Well, Facebook is a text-based system, people. Like, what happened to the Blue app? That's my other question.
People in their 20s and 30s, Jess, who don't remember Facebook.
No, but the Blue app. Look, I think the Blue app history is like, look, it was always friends-based initially, which was great and is challenging in its own ways, especially as friendships and the networks evolve. But it's like that's the core of what it was designed for. You know, I have my own views about how Pages and then a lot of the public stuff was actually implemented and some of the issues there. But like, you know, I do think that there is an opportunity for Threads to do something that Facebook's Blue app does not currently accomplish for anyone, right? Like, I don't. And there's all sorts of reasons for that, down to the fact that like Facebook, I believe, and this is not based on any knowledge, but just experience, like I don't post publicly on it, largely because I'm fairly certain that posting publicly quashes your distribution on it as a profile, like algorithmically. So like I think there's clearly an opportunity for do something here. I am less convinced, other than to say that Twitter is a shockingly unsuccessful company. In the big picture, like shockingly, right? Given the where it was.
Didn't you say yesterday, Sam, that Meta had gained a Twitter in market cap over the course of?
Oh, that was this morning. Like I just looked at the app and I was like, it wasn't. I think it depends how you mark Twitter, but I think like the number this morning.
I don't think most people realize this. By the way, I don't think they realize the sheer scale difference between the two.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 3% pop in Facebook stock this morning was worth was $20 billion pop on, I believe, mostly this news. So like. The scale is very different. I do think there's an opportunity. I would love it as a product person. Very excited for this, and I will definitely use it. And look, more inventory is more inventory. It's good for the business. And I do think that, like, you know, the old line on Twitter always was that Twitter was like a clown car driven into a gold mine and then somehow drove back out, right? Like, so like, you know, do I have a lot more faith in the Facebook leadership to get into a gold mine and actually stay in the gold mine? Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say the thing
take it away, Dave. What's your view?
So I have to say, I'm very excited to see Facebook / Meta. I have such a hard time calling it Meta, making social apps again. It's pretty cool to see them doing what they're the best in the world at. And I saw this quote this morning that I really liked, which is that while Zuck is only a white belt in jiu-jitsu, he's a sensei in social media, which I thought was kind of a.
Dave, did you say that?
No, I didn't. It was in a newsletter that I read this morning, and I thought it was kind of true. You know, like the world is up against real masters here. You know, there's been a lot of work that's gone into becoming masters at social networking and social media. And all they need to do is convert, I guess, about 18% of Instagram to Threads, and they'll have an app the size of Twitter. And so, like, I think this question of, like, is this going to work is pretty clear it's going to. And the other thing that just to give some impressions of using it, I had instant positive feelings about it. I have immense negative feelings about Twitter. I've always thought Twitter was kind of a suicide machine. Like it kind of really gets people in their negative emotions worse than almost any social media app that's ever been created. And for whatever reason, Threads feels better already out of the gate.
Because there are 2,500 users on it.
No, there's a way that the interactions, I mean, this is where my product mind gets engaged, right? Like the way that they're doing interactions is interesting. And I think partially it's also that Facebook's running it, right? That I think they're great. They're world-class at this. And I think that's not to be underestimated here.
So I'm going to pause, Dave, for one sec, because you could look at the launch of this and say, Meta has once again just ripped off another product, another UX, and they did that with Snap and Stories. They did that with TikTok and Reels, and now they're doing it with Twitter and Threads. And there's, you know, you could argue. Well, I'm just saying. Yeah,
and I've got a really interesting opinion on this, which is that I was there at the creation of the Facebook platform, and Jack Dorsey and Ev Williams and Biz Stone were launch partners of the Facebook platform, and they built Twitter to update Facebook statuses. Mm-hmm. And so you could argue that Facebook invented this. And Twitter went and then did their own innovation. Facebook bought Friend Feed. The feed as a concept is not this like thing that Twitter invented. And it's, not even something that Facebook invented. We did a lot of innovation around this over the years. Everybody's done innovation around this. There've been like literally thousands and thousands of apps created, over the last 20 years.
But there's also, I think that's a fair point. But I think there's also this credit of like, okay, you're like the sensei is back doing what they do best. But like, a lot of people think Facebook has invented one product called Newsfeed. And ripped off a bunch of others and copied a bunch of others and executed well. Now, I guess I want to ask, I think I'm going to ask one, do you believe that? And also, is that good or bad?
Well, first, Jess, you were around from the earliest, like the launch of Facebook, and you know that there were several innovations that predated Feed that were actually, I would argue, as or if not more important to getting things started, right? So, like, that's obviously it's just Feed. Even if you argue Feed was the last major innovation, which is not, because like the like button came after, a lot of other stuff came after. It's hard to argue is the only one. I'd also say like, look, none of these ideas are actually that unique. If you're in the tech circles we're in, like they're all floating around, right? Like you know, arguably Path invented the multi-reaction thing that became very popular on Facebook. But candidly, that was out there before too. It wasn't like a idea no one ever thought of, right? It's just Path implemented it well, right? And so I don't think it makes that big of a difference. I will say this, that historically, obviously, it's almost become a joke that Facebook has just ripped off or /copied these apps very successfully into their core.
A joke that the United States government is looking into. So let's not trivialize the joke.
But here's the difference. The nice part about ripping off Twitter, if that's what this is, which it is no one likes Twitter. So no one's like, oh, you ripped off Twitter. Everyone's like, yeah, like Twitter kind of deserves to be ripped off. And I go a step further, which is the fact that it's not run by the founders anymore. And the founders are very negative on their own
it's not
app.
like the hockey thing. That's the difference.
Like, like, oh, poor, what's his name?
I think that's what I meant earlier. I think that's what I meant earlier when I said I just have this instant positive feeling about it. And I don't know. Part of me
it shows how the brand has changed. Like everyone's like, "Oh, Meta is saving us from Elon's destruction."
Well, I want to be clear.
Let's just reflect
Instagram.
on like no one said that ever. Like
you could argue that maybe they should have renamed Facebook Instagram because Instagram is a very positive brand in the world. I think that you can't. I think it's very hard to build a logical argument any other way, and so I feel just very positive about this. I feel kind of like. I think my Facebook lineage is coming out using this app. Like it just makes me kind of proud of the company that they're doing this again after many years of not creating social apps. I think it just, to me, it feels good for them. And I don't know, there's some stuff about the product. I guess I will say about the social graph, this implementation that they did is really interesting. They recommend right out of the gate that you follow all of the people that you follow on Instagram. People may not do that, but it's interesting to see it building out in real time. And Sam, to your points earlier, I find one of the most fascinating things just using it the last 24 hours is seeing all of these Instagram folks that I know and love for their videos and photos trying to use text, and it really doesn't work.
Yeah, no, totally. I wrote about this earlier on Twitter, which is like one of my favorite Instagram accounts is this account called Nut Shots, which is pictures of people getting hit in the nuts. And I look forward to the Nut Shots.
What about Jerry of the Day? You could have gone with Jerry of the Day.
But Nut Shots is like Jerry of the Day, only better. And like Jerry
I
of
was
the Day,
going to say, it's like, I don't want to see my favorite yoga instructors or pilots, tweeting or using threads, right? Like, no, totally. It's kind of an interesting problem.
That's okay. That's why, again, it's transplanting a pig heart into a monkey. And I think it's got enough juice to get the thing started, which is great. That's all you need. Because I also follow Jess and I also follow Dave, and it's enough.
Oh, good. Yeah, you follow me
on Instagram. So it's enough. And then I think what'll happen is it'll just evolve in a different direction, and that'll be good. The graphs will rapidly diverge. But I just think the story day that Facebook hasn't launched any social apps recently is not 100% accurate. They've actually tried to launch a bunch of social apps, but they've always done it with a very hands-off, let's try to rebuild the graph from zero.
Not in the last 5 years.
Yeah, there was one that they killed. What was it?
You guys, not in the last 5 years.
Yeah. No,
No,
there was
that's just wrong. Like they've launched a whole bunch of them. They've just all failed. And I think it's partially
failed.
because
But they failed because they didn't use the lessons that we learned in the Facebook platform very early on, which was they didn't use their own graph and their own distribution. They just launched them on the side.
The government was breathing
made sense.
down their neck. Like they weren't even allowed to back end integrate WhatsApp and Instagram and Meta, right? I mean, it was I think they're taking a different posture now, and it'll be interesting to also see what regulators say.
Well, and I mean, I haven't followed deeply, but hasn't like the Europe already said they're not going to allow it? Which that's the fascinating story to me on this whole thing is like what happens. You launch a new app. Like I actually think Twitter without Europe does not hurt my brain at all. I don't think I follow any Europeans. I'm not interested in Europe, but like it is an interesting thing to like launch a global app.
We're going to Europe in 4 days.
I know. I'm like, wait, you're skipping the pod next week because you're going to Europe.
Great place to play.
Don't be nice to Europe. Great, be nice.
No, I looked at our statistics, and only 95% of our listeners are in the U.S. So, and it's a 4th of July. So, screw Europe.
You just can't get over GDPR. You just can't. You're never going to.
No, I'll never forgive them for such terrible law.
Never.
The basic point is I was going to say is like I do think it's interesting. You talk about what's going to be different this time, or like launching an app. It's like it is pretty interesting to see a social app launch without Europe, right? Is like an interesting pattern that'll start playing out into the future, because I think that's a really interesting story here that is very different than historical launches. And you talk about kind of all the meta workings at play, not Meta the company, but bigger picture Meta, of like how you launch social apps and what graphs you use and what data you can and can't touch and like that is a first, I believe.
Yeah. Let's kind of bring this segment to a close by talking about like really what's going to happen to Twitter. So just to recap some of the news, Elon, a couple of days ago, at a dramatic series, announced some new policies that limited how many tweets you could view, required you to be logged in to see certain content that you didn't have to see before, said some of these were temporary, said that they were reactions to bots and things scraping Twitter, then announced that TweetDeck, which is basically a way, it's sort of the pro interface for using Twitter if you're monitoring multiple accounts, would become a paid-only feature. Are we seeing like also check back in on Reddit? How's Reddit doing?
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's not forget about Reddit. And I think that there's a pretty broad desire right now all over the internet. I think people are looking for a home for these conversations. And I also think...
No, now we lost them. Let's see if they come back to Montana. I mean, I think, look, are you going to stop using Twitter, Jessica?
Samuel, I don't know. No, I'm not going to stop using Twitter.
Of course you're going to keep using Twitter. So will I.
Yeah, I thought...
It's like fine. It's like...
But I honestly, like TweetDeck has got... I'm going to have to re-architect all my Twitter behavior. I'll be able to do it. I'll still use it for distribution for the information journalism.
Do you pay for it, Twitter?
I don't.
I do.
I
Who
don't.
cares? Like, give them $6.
I pay to follow Elon.
I don't
you guys
want the
pay
blue
to follow
check mark.
Elon?
Everyone's going to make fun of me.
Didn't you have
Elon
one?
does not need your
Elon?
money. You should stop paying
Well, I
Elon.
want to
know what he's
verified,
talking
but
about.
now that the blue check mark means something else. It means like you're a schmuck who paid for more distribution. So.
Yeah.
More schmuck then. I mean, look,
or TweetDeck. I mean, I think we should recast
I think these
it.
things, kind of like cryptocurrency, are very hard to kill, right? Like they can take slings and arrows left and right, and like they will, but they're not going to die. They'll just like evolve. And I do think Twitter's in.
Hasn't the world killed a lot of the cryptocurrencies? Just
no, I mean that's the irony.
Ones?
It's like they're all still alive, right? Like that's the they so
all
a lot of them,
still
especially
alive.
the scams, are out. But like the reality, like it's the only way to kill Bitcoin is for all the nodes to turn off, right? Like, and that's never going to happen, right? Bitcoin will never die, right? And like I think that with Twitter, it's like, look, so long as anyone's looking at it, and lots of people are, right? Like you're just it's gonna keep going. And I think, especially the interesting thing about text is that even compared to other medium forms, it's unbelievably easy to copy paste, right? Like everything is not that hard. Like you put a photo somewhere, you put it somewhere else, blah, blah, blah. But like text is particularly easy to put in multiple places. And so anyone who's kind of interested in distribution or having a conversation is more than willing to have it in incrementally more places if that exists. And Twitter's not going to go to zero. Now, I do think the problem is it's really hard to see a positive story for Twitter. Like, it's not dead, but it's hard to see it re-energizing in a direction that creates a ton more value or engagement, right? And so I think
they have
that's
to
really
launch a new product. I mean, they're going to have to do something. I completely
Well, it seems
agree.
like they're trying
and
to
like
go
that's
more
going to be
video.
the bird's not going to die. It's just going to be like in a cage forever. And like,
But wait, does the bird get a pig heart or a monkey heart or a chicken heart?
a transplant, like if they can transplant their heart into a koala.
Just taking your analogy.
I'm just going with it. I just
milking
feel like it's a transplant thing. So I don't know. I mean, I just don't think it's I don't think it's existential for Twitter, but I do think it's existential for Twitter ever being $100 billion company, right?
Yeah.
And like
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
the
I
thing
think
again.
it
I guess the
definitely
question is, does
caps
Elon
Twitter's
even care,
growth.
right? Like, the reality is Tesla stock has rebounded. He's rich
Yeah.
again.
He's training for the
he's
big
training.
fight.
Because he wasn't rich when
I mean, I
this
guess the
happened
story
now.
that like you bought something for $40 billion is it was culturally so central and controlled all the text in the world.
We actually tried not to buy it, and then the court said you had to buy it too.
Well, but
So,
initially, I think the catnip was that community being like, this is like a shockingly influential platform per dollar, right? Like, it doesn't cost that much to own, again, an incredible amount of social capital and distribution. And like that story, I think, is very threatened. So I think the thesis for buying Twitter just got even weaker, right? If, this plays out, I think
it was
the
to
concept that
be the
Elon
free
makes money on
speech.
it gets worse. But it's not going to die. It's just going to not be great. And like, that's fine, is my sense. All right, we're back after a brief interlude where it looks like Elon cut off Dave and Brit's Starlink to stop the episode.
To stop
He got
the
mad at us.
censorship. What happened to the free speech network, Elon?
Oh, man.
Okay.
Pay him too. I pay him on many fronts. This is annoying.
Okay, we got to wrap. We got to wrap with a more or less poll on Twitter Threads before we get to our final two segments here. So, I'm sorry, on Meta Threads versus Twitter. Okay, for each of us, which is your dominant text-based social network 3 years from now? Twitter or Threads? Dave.
I have to say that Brit's opinion on this pod kind of changed my perspective on this. And
Nice.
I think
Open
she's
minds.
right that even just in this early watching the social graph mechanic play out, I think that the mainstream audience is going to be on Threads and it's going to be powerful. And so I think, to Sam's point, that distribution advantage can't be ignored, and it will be very powerful 3 years from now, no question.
But what are you going to use more?
I think it's hard to say. I do think there's nuance. Maybe I'm the sole dissenter here that thinks there's nuance in how these social products get used based on very nuanced ways that the feature sets work out. And so I think that how the conversation evolves there and whether or not this threaded format has its own kind of conversational style is going to matter. And, it may end up that it ends up just as sort of trolly and negative as Twitter. We'll see. But I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt so far, based on what I'm seeing. And
But you're not sure what you'll use more. So
no,
that's
I
a not sure.
I think I will be there more, actually.
You think you'll be on Threads more than Twitter?
Yeah,
Because
and
of
You're not on
this.
Twitter very often.
Yeah,
of the
and one
vibe.
day of using Threads, I already feel better about it. That's what I was trying to say earlier.
When there's 250 million people, let's see how you feel. But yes, I think that is a good. I think that's a good point. Brit, which one for you?
My opinion is based on the product and how it works, and we'll see.
Okay, I'm going to open Twitter in the morning and read some headlines, and then some bots are going to tell me like 10 ways to get healthy and 10 steps, and then follow me for more and join my newsletter. And then I'm going to switch over to Threads to figure out what people are like actually talking about and in like modern culture. So I think I'm going to use both for different reasons. I think that's what like most social networks are adapting to. Like Reddit I use when I'm like researching something. Instagram I use for like connection to a certain set of people. Pinterest I use for another. So Threads has to find its footing with its like, that's what I meant earlier, like its audience and like, what's the point of this? What am I doing here on it? And I think it will be different than Twitter, but Twitter will still be around for its purpose.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this earlier, but there really is no, like the graph has no bearing on what shows up in the Threads main feed. Like as far as I can
we
tell,
were talking about the role of like algorithmic discovery being.
it seems like
know,
it's entirely
big.
algorithmic. There's no graph. Like the graph has almost no bearing on the feed. So that actually might change my opinion slightly. We'll see.
Sam, for you, which one's going to matter more?
Well, whenever I want to shit post on crypto or VC or whatever, I think I'll still be on Twitter. You know, as I said, I think Twitter will be a completely neutered platform, but it's not going to die. And Threads, I mean, I will definitely cross post to, and my bet is I'll end up finding some things I'm interested in. But I'll take the obvious to be more and less in the purest form. I think it has absolutely nothing to do with feature set and 100% to do with who's there. The reason Twitter is that for me is because that's where I grew most of my follower base, and therefore that's what they want to hear, and that's what I want to say to them, and I get value from it because in convoluted ways I get paid to tweet, right? I put stuff out there, and somehow with a venture investment, it comes back to me in that narrow audience. You know, on Facebook, I hilariously have like 200,000 followers in Indonesia because when that launched publicly, there was a lot of growth in Indonesia, and the growth team juiced growth for that product in Indonesia. So whenever I want to talk to anyone in Indonesia, I post on Facebook publicly. And I think for Threads, it'll just be a question of actually, you know, I think currently the people that follow me on Instagram are basically my friends because that's kind of when that grew up. You know, if the thing models that and extends, maybe I'll hear some more high school and college updates again, the way, you know, original Facebook worked, because it's clearly fallen off in the Blue app. But if it evolves in a different direction, it evolves in a different direction. And I think it will come down to like what gets distribution. The medium, unfortunately, is the message.
These are great, but very long-winded, I would say, more or less.
Well, the answer is we'll use it all. We'll use it all. I don't use Pinterest.
Twitter's going to be more important to me.
It is interesting to hear the different graphs. Like even just hearing Sam's response, like it made me think like, you know, my Instagram graph, I actually much more enjoy talking to than my Twitter one.
But
so,
Dave,
and you already talked to them in messages.
I'm going to call you out. The reason you don't like Twitter is because you were featured as a promoted person when Twitter launched. So you have hundreds of thousands of randos that follow you. So every time you post anything, you get all this shit back on it, right? And it's purely because of how it grew.
That's not entirely accurate. It's a fair call out, but most of my interactions are with the tech audience. They're the same audience you interact with, you know, like it's just like a totally, my long tail followers there don't bother me at all. It's more the type of conversation that bothers me.
Because my understanding, at least from a lot of people who were featured early or like were in the promoted sections of any of these things, as I was when Facebook was growing its public graph, and that's how I have all these Indonesian followers, is that the biggest sin to any of these networks is artificial promotion, because you end up with a bunch of people that are actually not interested in your contact and are orthogonal to what you want. And it makes the experience absolutely terrible for you.
Absolutely.
Because it ends up putting you in this position where like you post something that to your community sounds good, but you end up just getting tons of hate on it from randos.
Absolutely.
So I actually think what'll be really interesting in growing Threads, right, and how this works is what lessons you learn and don't learn and how sensitive you are, because the easy ways to grow follower accounts are usually the ways that fuck up the networks over time. And again, I think that's what the history you saw from a lot of these launches is like the organic, slow, you know, fast.harvard.edu, growing into other universities, et cetera, worked really well because it was so authentic. And what really fucks this up is inauthentic growth in kind of graphs.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think to that point, the Instagram graph, whether it translates to text, really is the only question then, right? Like, because that is where
or also how much they diverge, right? I mean, I think that's a fair point. Like the fact that these things will diverge very much, and the role of algorithmically recommended stuff may make the graph ultimately not that important.
Pig-hearted to a monkey. We'll see if it works.
Okay, so before we wrap, we've really eaten up a tremendous amount of our time on this fascinating discussion, but it's kind of fun. We're talking about social again. I thought social was dead, you know. So let's see, a couple other things we just want to bring up that hit our radars this week. Dave, you want to talk about Chat GPT and what you kind of shared in the thread?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that there was a report today that the Chat GPT usage or engagement is down quite a bit, which we've been hearing in the back channels, not just about GPT, but many of the other AI chatbots.
Are you surprised, Dave?
No, I'm not surprised. And it was interesting. My usage has been similar. And it really reminds me to everything we just talked about of social apps. And, you know, Sam, we've seen, this time and time again where the, social app or consumer apps of any kind get a huge juice of engagement straight out of the gate. And then once the initial kind of excitement fades, people are looking for the next thing. And I do think that GPT and a lot of these things have a lot of work to do to translate making this technology useful to the broader consumer audience. My analogy has been that we're in the command line phase of this thing, and nobody's actually figured out the graphical user interface for these AI technologies, and we've got a long way to go before we do.
Yeah, on Twitter, Loic. I was gonna say on Twitter, Loic posted, who I like very much today, which I just browsed by, saying, "Is anyone else already bored of AI generated images?" And the answer is, "Yup." Right? So, flash in the pan. Move on. Back to crypto.
Well, also,
I don't know. I just don't think they've gotten that good yet.
It's so early. I mean, it's so early. And also, we've, the information's had a bunch of scoops about what's happening at OpenAI, ranging from considering releasing open source to launching an app store to most recently launching more of a personal assistant that is primarily focused on work-related things, so more competing with Microsoft than Siri. And to me, the picture is just no one really knows what the main interface is going to be. No one knows which layer of the stack is the choke point for distribution and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think we should write any of these things off, but it's definitely a good spot, Dave, on it, because I think it's a sign that we all kind of knew there was this wow, silly moment of oh man, you can do this. Almost look, my iPhone has a timer or something like that. And I think
my take
kind of
is not
to the
a
next phase.
Pessimistic one. My take is still an optimistic one. I actually am excited to try to figure out some of these interfaces, but I think we had this several weeks of everybody under the sun declaring that they must have a conversational interface for everything. And, I just think that's not the case, and that there are amazing things to be built on top of this technology, but it's going to take real design work and real engineering work to come up with extraordinary ways for people to interact with this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the APIs are cool. I was going to say the APIs are cool and they're valuable, and actively integrating them in some really interesting places to do some interesting back-end type work more efficiently and faster. But I am counting down the months until I get to do my I told you so victory dance on this one. There's no way this is a consumer app in the future.
We can have a little clock.
I still think I'm still on Team Bard, by the way. I'm curious about Bard's engagement. I'm sure they
Bard's great, but it's you use it very rarely, but it is good.
I use it quite frequently.
Right. Okay. We'll revisit this. This is a great topic. We don't have time for my full. We got to circle back to enterprise at some point because Information also had a story this week that Microsoft accidentally released some documents that showed its cloud business is not as big as people think it is, and the real $1 trillion war is at stake between Amazon and Google and Microsoft are all about the cloud. So you cloud lovers out there, know we're coming for you. But we're going to wrap with, pursuing the lifestyle element of the pod a little bit. But there have been a whole slew of new startups that are basically building full body scanners to try and help early detection of a range of things, and dramatically lowering the cost from a more traditional MRI, but still very, very expensive. A lot of buzz, a lot of friends doing them, recommending them or not. I saw one started by Daniel Ek that the Information wrote about several months ago, just raised a new round, which got me thinking about it again. And since posting about it, actually, a lot of people have responded on Twitter figuring out is it worth it? What are the pros and cons? And I like this topic because I think it also represents tech creeping into medicine and healthcare in lots of ways. But Brit, you were literally the first person I knew who did these scans and evangelized them. So tell the listeners out there what they need to know.
Okay, I've been doing full body scans since 2014 when I had my first baby, primarily because I was fascinated with how my body would change pre and post partum and between babies. And so I got bone scans, muscle scans, MRIs, full, and I don't have an actual doctor. I go in once a year for a $3,000 body scan and all these
You
tests.
should have a doctor too. We're getting up there. Get a
I've got
doctor.
one
Chat
medical.
GPT is her doctor.
Oh,
Yeah.
One Medical's great. I love One Medical.
I've just never used.
Shout out
I've
to
got
One
an
Medical.
OB and one medical, and then this once a
Are you
year.
having more
body-
kids?
And I love it. And I think that the fact that now there's a $300 one is like going to be awesome.
Is there a $300 one?
That's what Daniel Ek is doing. It's like,
Is it actually $300 or is
It
that
can't be
just
$300. No.
It's not $300.
well, that's what it's like being touted at. Okay, whatever.
That's the hype.
Okay.
What's
sub
the one? Did you do
$500.
Prenuvo? Which one did you do?
I
Tell
did
the people.
QBio, but I also did like back in the day before QBio, like actual DEXA scans, 360 body scans. I did my VO2 max every year, and I would
I
compare
have a
year
good
over
VO2
year
max.
to see like how my body was changing physically and then internally, and all the blood tests and urine tests and all those things too. And I think it's really awesome for preventative healthcare. I think AI obviously is going to help a lot. I think that it's like going to be interesting from a privacy and data standpoint of like, now do these companies own the data and they're analyzing it with AI? So what does that mean? And then I also think there's going to be a lot of like false positives and people are going to have some like bad outcomes.
So that's why the medical community apparently do not like these. And actually, my doctor, I said, should I get them? And she said, you can get them, but I should be on the call when they give you your results because otherwise you'll freak out.
But they're actual doctors
you could just put
analyzing their
GPT
results.
on the call and tell GPT to interpret it positively.
Look, I've done a bunch of these. I do get
Which one did you do, Sam? Again, I want the people to have practical
kind of
advice.
like
Prenuvo?
QBio. I've done Empyrean. I've done version
That
of it.
that didn't do this, but yes, that was different.
Well, that did what Brit was saying, which was the DEXA scan and other things like that. But QBio was probably the first one I did. And it's cool. You get cool pictures of the inside of your body, and they make you feel like it's worth the thousands of dollars.
Britt, did you change anything based on your evolution?
Yes, actually, like my left and right thigh mass, like muscle mass, are different. So I like work out differently sometimes. But then like in between babies,
I think I'm on the less side of this.
okay, I think for women,
we got a less.
Can I also tell you my startup idea that is it's
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Okay. I also believe
gosh.
in the future of personalized fashion and that we're going to have like
What?
clothing made to fit our bodies.
Yeah,
And
so like your thigh is bigger, so you want thigh holes a little bit bigger
yeah, like
on
when
one
you
side
go
of
in
your
for
pants.
your health scan, you should also get your fashion scan and then plug that into all your
Is this
favorite
conversation happening right now?
e-commerce websites and get your custom fit clothes. That's all. Bye.
I'm still laughing about thigh holes, Sam.
It's like, look, it's like my
can't
DEXA
even-
scan says my thigh's a little big. I'm gonna need a little bit of
Things
thigh
fit
room.
differently, Sam. I'm just
You
saying.
guys, like this whole thing is so
Go,
disconnected.
Dave.
from
Dave
reality.
gets the last word. Bring it home.
This whole thing is so disconnected from reality and what like mainstream Americans need in their health.
Disagree.
It's just like I have this question, which is a bigger question, which is, do digital technologies even know how to scan biology and tell you anything meaningful? Like there was another story last week about consciousness and how for, 50 years post World War, all of this digital technology, all these breakthroughs in medicine, we still have not even the slightest clue how consciousness works in the mind. And we're sitting here like, we're going to scan this and scan that and live forever. And I kind of have this question of like, do we even know what we're scanning for? And, let alone the
You're
medical.
scanning for thigh hole size, dude.
Yeah. So our clothes fit better, Dave. That's
It's
the
like,
reason
to
I'm
me,
doing
there's
it.
two questions. Like, will digital technology, maybe with AI, we'll start to be able to understand pattern matching. And, there was some cool cellular signaling related science that came out the last 2 weeks. But on the other hand, like this stuff is just so disconnected from like mainstream, like what we need to solve diabetes and like many of these like problems that
I don't
plague.
know. It's like,
you do
Dave,
it
if you're
together,
in an MRI and you're eating a Big Mac, it will see the Big Mac.
Okay, you do them Dave hasn't done one of it. You do them with the blood test and the urine test. You're not just
I'm sorry, I've done a lot of
thinking on the
scans.
Just
MRI.
spend
Look,
$10
you're in the
gazillion
MRI, you're eating the Big
and
Mac.
half of your life.
It's like, I can see the Big Mac in the MRI. Your blood work says you're eating a Big Mac.
On the pod, I think people will do this.
Brit, the mainstream can't afford this.
When it's $300.
Not yet. Yeah.
They will.
$300
Okay, guys.
is still too much.
Once a year, I think it's okay.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed body hacking with
You get a
Brit.
$300 scan for free.
Say that, Sam. Sorry, I
You
talked
buy a
over you.
$3,500 Apple headset, they throw in the $300 body scan for free.
Oh, okay.
Mainstream will do it.
Maybe.
Well, we thank you for this episode of Body Hacking with Brit. I enjoyed it very much.
Follow me on Instagram for more of my takes on biohacking.
Little housekeeping on the pod. So, in honor of the upcoming 40th birthday of Samuel Wharton Lesson, the lessons will be many, many time zones away next week, watching some tennis. So we're going to take a pause on the pod next week. If you're just joining us, listen to some past episodes. There are several up there. Send us your ideas via Twitter and Threads. We'll figure out how to get on that thing. And we'll look forward to seeing you back the following week to discuss more or less and everything happening. Have a great one, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.